Good evening and welcome. Our first order of business is that we are to go into closed session. I'll have the clerk read the recommendation, please.
The recommendation is that a closed meeting of council be held on June 27th, 2022 at 6:00 p.m. in accordance with section 239, subsection 2C of the Municipal Act 2001 to consider the following: an operational needs analysis, section 239 2C, land acquisition disposition.
I have a mover and a seconder. That is moved by Councillor Fetting, second by Councillor Fisher. Councillor Holman, you have a comment or something prior to our? Go ahead, please.
Thanks through the mayor. I'm just looking for clarification from the clerk that just for the reason for the closed on this.
It's in the recommendation.
Sorry, Arthur, I think you're on mute.
Okay, if I could defer to the Director of Public Works, to Jeff, to discuss.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. This report is brought forward in closed due to the nature of, I guess, what we'll call sort of a targeted direction for negotiating with two particular properties. So in this case, because we are seeking direction, and the report itself didn't list out the addresses, but we are asking for direction from council to target two locations and to report back. So the reason for it being enclosed would be because we would be subject to negotiations with them, and so we don't want to lose a negotiating position or a potential for a negotiating position based on them being able to identify that, yeah, they may have a great opportunity here, and we are targeting them for a potential agreement. So that's the nature of this report being enclosed.
A follow-up, Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to confirm, so the reason is that, so it could have been an open, but the best reason to have it enclosed is because it just changes our negotiation positions if it was to be an open.
That's correct. It's pretty standard procedure that when we're approaching going into negotiation, that we do any conversation in closed prior to that. Ms. Chalmers, you wish to follow up?
Yes, I just want to reiterate that there will be discussion in closed session with respect to specific properties. And there could be some discussion around costs. So, we need to protect our negotiating position, and we are allowed to do so under the closed provisions. So speaking generically about property acquisition is not permitted in closed, but dealing with specific properties is permitted in closed.
Okay. Further follow-up, Councillor Holman?
Thank you. I just wanted to thanks for that clarification. Just know that the scrutiny that we're under for our closed meetings, especially when it comes to properties. So just wanted to make sure. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. So we're looking at a mover and seconder. Did we've got a mover and seconder, so all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we will take Welcome, everybody. We need a motion to reconvene and open. The clerk read that recommendation, please.
Recommendation is that council reconvenes in open session at 7 o'clock PM, 7:02.
I have a mover and a seconder. Counselor Fenning, Counselor Gerber, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Say welcome to everyone and for a moment of reflection. Before we begin tonight's meeting, let us take a moment to recognize that July 1st is Canada Day. Canada Day provides an opportunity for us to acknowledge and appreciate the beautiful country we live in. On this day, let us reflect on the tremendous opportunities and freedoms we enjoy as Canadians. I encourage all of us to learn more about and honor the shared history, diversity, and values that have created this great nation. Whether you're looking ahead to a summer of firing up the barbecue, camping outdoors, or heading to the beach, this is a chance to reflect on where we are today and where we are headed. This year, let's celebrate the hope we share for an even stronger and more inclusive Canada. On behalf of council, I wish everyone a safe and happy Canada Day. I will now ask Councillor Fenning to read the land acknowledgement, please.
We've gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. And as we come to the end of Indigenous History Month, I want to acknowledge that I am a treaty person, like we all are, and am grateful for the enduring presence and knowledge of our Indigenous neighbors and friends.
Thank you. Are there any, there are no additions to the agenda. Adoption of the agenda. Ask the clerk to read the recommendation, please.
That the agenda as presented for June 27th, 2022 be adopted.
That is moved by Councillor Hallman, seconded by Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. The clerk, please read the recommendation for the previous minutes of the previous meeting.
That the minutes of the following meeting be adopted as presented, June 13th, 2022, regular council meeting.
And that is moved by Councillor Fisher, seconded by Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We have no public meetings and we have no presentations tonight. So we're on to the consent agenda. We will now move into the consent agenda. If members of council have any questions and want to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on consent items unless items are requested to be removed from the regular agenda. I would ask that the clerk read the recommendation for the consent items, but first we'll see if anyone wishes. I have one question on the request for the use of the parks, and were there any responses on those?
Through you, the chair, there were none.
There are no responses. Thank you. So the recommendation for the three items, please.
Yes, that the recommendations for consent items 11.1 through to 11.3 be approved.
Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Fetting, seconded by Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So, takes us on to reports. And the first report is the Nith River Promenade final design. Ms. Jackson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report seeks council direction to proceed with issuing a tender for the construction of the Nith River Promenade improvements. And that is based on the public consultation and updated drawings that are included in this report this evening. Council will recall that staff brought the 90% drawings forward for your review in March of this year. And we were seeking support for the concept plus direction to do public consultation with respect to the design. So the public consultation did occur, and we did an online process, as well as sent emails directly to neighboring businesses and organizations who had a vested interest in this particular project. And the consultation garnered 23 responses with suggestions towards the final design. There's a summary of those responses included as Appendix B in this report for your information and interest. And staff also met on site with members of Let's Tree Wilmot to discuss their questions and concerns about the number of trees that were being removed and any loss of grassy spaces along the embankment. So staff supported many of the suggestions received through the consultation process, and we brought them forward to the consultant, and they worked those into the final design that you see here this evening. So with respect to some of the changes that are outlined in the report, we have reduced the amount of hard surfacing. We've reduced the number of trees that were being eliminated. We've included a circular pattern in the gathering area. We've added some safety features and assurances that the final design meets the AODA legislation. So with these revised drawings, staff are now seeking council support to issue an RFT for construction purposes so we can move ahead with this project. And Mr. Martin is here this evening to help answer questions. Don't know if Ms. Schenk is on the call. She was running between children's sports activities and was hoping to get on, but I'm not sure she's made it on. But certainly Mr. Martin and myself will be happy to answer any questions with respect to the report or the design. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just a couple of things. I did go over the report, but I might have missed it, so forgive me. But were any, from the original design and then coming forward, were any of the flood mitigation concerns that were raised when we did a flood mitigation study with the GRCA a couple of years back, were any of those concerns brought in, and will this help with any of the flooding that we do see in the downtown core? With having it sort of expanded, what will that do with some of the flood issue concerns that we had? And then I have a follow-up after that. Thank you.
So flood control is a GRCA directive, and I'll ask Mr. Martin if he wants to add anything with respect to discussions that were held with the design group. But this project was not intended to resolve flood issues. But maybe Mr. Martin, if you want to add anything there, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Martin.
Through Mayor Armstrong. So no, I would agree with Ms. Jackson's comments. The scope was to deal with erosion improvements and control, not to do with flood mitigation. So the outcome of the design was to ensure that there was no net fill. So basically there's cut fill, but the balance is that the conditions are the same before and after, such that there won't be any impacts on flooding. It's certainly not designed to minimize flooding, but the intent of the design was that wouldn't create any new impacts. So that was kind of the scope of the project and what was agreed upon with the Grand River Conservation Authority.
So follow up, being that they were leading the study on the flood mitigation, and I get that that's not part of the scope, but are we going to be causing more problems by what we're doing? I know that you're saying no impact, but was there any consideration to sort of at least look at sort of incorporating some of the thought processes that the GRCA came back with? I mean, I know they're part and parcel of our communication, but I am concerned, like, as we keep getting flooding, like, are we doing more harm by not taking into account some of the concerns that were raised in our previous report?
Through your Armstrong, I mean, certainly in this instance, the scope of the project and the location of the works that are being proposed really aren't within the area that, without substantive changes to that area, there would be no way to improve flood mitigation measures in that limited area that we're working with. So certainly the intent was just to improve what was there. And again, given the nature and the extent and area that we're dealing with, it really was kind of a smaller scope than what the scale of those flood mitigation studies would have we're looking at.
Okay, and then the second part of my question follow-up. We don't have I'm more of a visual person. I can't read engineer drawings. And I don't see what I'm looking at. Do we have an actual sort of artist drawing rendering to sort of show the changes? Because to all I'm seeing is a lot of lines, and it's not really, I mean, there might be other people out there that are watching us and not quite sure what changes and what's different, because the original drawings did have some pretty pictures for people to kind of have a visual. I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing what I'm supposed to be seeing for me to see if the changes are good ones. Thank you.
Your Armstrong, so we did not have the rendering updated. There was an earlier version that was that council would have seen that somewhat reflects what's proposed here. The only change visually that you would see if we had updated the rendering was just the upper trail from the central viewing area, that the extension from down from Huron Street to the water, from that viewing area out to the library. The upper trail was removed through this design to minimize tree removal and to keep some of that grassy area. And then from that viewing area towards the dam, essentially the trail location was shifted slightly from where it was before to maintain as many trees as possible in that location. But from a rendering perspective, it really wouldn't have looked any different than what you saw with the previous report, other than, again, the upper trail towards the library wouldn't be shown, but in terms of the perspective that was shown on the rendering, there would be really minimal changes from what you had previously seen.
Thank you.
I assume that the GRCA saw the final drawings.
Yes, and they are would be engaged through the permit process.
Right. Very good. I see no further questions. So I'll ask clerk to read the recommendation, please.
I'm sorry, I apologize. The recommendation is that staff be directed to proceed with tendering the construction of the Nith River Promenade based on the updated final design included within report PFRS 2022-026.
Have a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved by Councillor Fenning, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is the contract for a sewer flusher hydro excavation truck. Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you, Mayor. This report summarizes the procurement process for the flusher hydro excavation truck replacement. Council may recall the shift in our approach to purchasing major vehicles and equipment, where we discussed in the 2022 budget process that the RFP process would be started sooner in advance of the actual capital budget year. And so this particular unit was put out for RFP this year with our intended replacement schedule for next year. This strategy was done so to align better with delivery timing and knowing when the costs would actually hit the year in which it was budgeted. And so for many of our larger vehicles and equipment, we do know that the industry standard today is upwards of 16 months typically for delivery, and some as long as up to 2 years from the time of purchase to delivery. So as such, it was advantageous for us to do so now in terms of releasing the RFP and undertake the procurement process in advance of the year, so that we have the definitive costs of the unit and receive the vehicle in the year that we need. In this case, the recommendation of award has a delivery estimate of September of next year, which is great in terms of delivery timing. And we do know what the definitive costs would be in accordance with the RFP process. I'm happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just you know, there's been a whole lot of conversation over all of these procurement conversations about the rising cost of everything. Do you have any kind of a sense of how much this particular type of vehicle has increased? And I mean, it's fine if you don't, just was wondering.
Through you, Mayor, it can be more difficult, I think, when you look at unit specification to unit specification being exactly similar. In this case, we looked at a different type of unit than we had previously, so there is a bit of a cost increase associated with that. However, that also comes back with a sort of a business case in terms of what it allows us to do and reduce in other service areas or increase in terms of efficiency. For direct material costs, you know, there are a number of different material cost increases that have been reported over the last 6 months and certainly over the last 2 years, to look at that in general. But certainly over the last 6 months, we know of some material increase costs for PVC and things like steel and stuff like that, that we do see a general percentage increase, but not something that I could necessarily tie to this particular purchase at this point.
I see no further questions. Have the clerk read the recommendation, please.
The recommendation is that RFP 2022-28 be awarded to FST Canada Incorporated, Joe Johnson Equipment, to supply and deliver one new combination sewer flusher hydro excavation truck as per their proposal date of May 30th, 2022, in the base amount of $637,000, $203,000 plus HST, and further that $650,000 be incorporated within the 2023 capital program with proportional funding allocations from development charges and infrastructure reserve funds.
Thank you. I think we all have a tendency to kind of choke over those amounts, Mr. Clerk, so we forgive you. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Gerber, seconded by Councillor Gordick. All in favor, please. That is carried. Thank you. Next is the Bridge Street Bridge. Mr. Monahuse.
Thank you, Mayor. This report summarizes the next steps in the Bridge Street Bridge reconstruction project. The project has been in the detailed design, tendering, and construction phase portion of the project since January 2022, where, if council recalls, we had a report come forward for council to endorse with the preferred alternative. Following council endorsement of that preferred alternative in January, staff proceeded with detailed design and tendering activities, with the follow-up reporting to council in March with respect to the discussion on relocation opportunities for the existing structure, and particularly looking at the wetlands project. So this report sort of summarizes where we are in terms of that, in terms of staff investigation, and a few preliminary options that we are at this point considering. Given some of the unknowns with relocation, the tender being recommended for award this evening contemplates two parts. First, the removal of the existing structure and temporary placement on the adjacent property. In order to facilitate this arrangement, an agreement is attached to this report that would secure the relationship with the adjacent landowner for storage purposes on a temporary basis. The second part includes full reconstruction of the new bridge in accordance with the EA. Note that the bids received, just in terms of the previous discussion we were just having about unit rates and costs of materials, that we certainly are seeing an increase in costs with particular unit rates, which can be seen in this tender value. These are a little easier to tie to particular cost increases. And just to answer one of the previous questions, in concrete, for example, we saw a 40 to 60% increase in some of the unit rates for a structure, obviously that's largely a concrete structure. So we certainly see that in terms of the impact to the overall costs of projects, and that's something that we are expecting to become the industry norm moving forward. With respect to the relocation potential, just as noted, there are a few additional items to consider in terms of the scope of relocation that staff have been working to review over the last few weeks. This report spoke to a sort of a high level number, talking about a substantial relocation of pieces that of the bridge that would more or less be broken down into 4 segments and shipped to size. So the number that you're seeing here in terms of the relocation cost represents a fairly substantial relocation proposal. And so it is like I mentioned, is sort of a large scale relocation in those 3 to 4 major pieces. So at this time, staff are reviewing the potential to revise the scope of repurposing and are essentially asking through this report to give us some more time to sort it out. And pending the results of that if we get to a point at the end of this year and are having challenges with some of the options to be considered in some of the funding sources, in the event that funding sources can't be found and options can't be further considered, that we would be asking for direction to proceed with demolition of the structure and removal at the end of this year. With that being said, we are hopeful, certainly in the last couple of weeks with discussions, that there is a solution that can be found and something that we can scope down to sort of a pared down version of a relocation. But we do also want to have something reasonable and appropriate for a time frame for us and for staff to figure this out and to move on to the next steps if appropriate. Certainly a lengthy summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions here should council have any. And I will note Ms. Jackson is likely available still as well if there are questions related to the wetlands project.
Okay. Councillor Fanning, I was waiting for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, was it that predictable? Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate staff going to the lengths to try and meet our request to try and find a solution to repurpose at least sections of it, and am very hopeful that we will succeed in that endeavor. And just again want to express my thanks for all the work that it's taken to sort of come up with a creative solution to something that's rather challenging.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the project looks like it's a go on paper anyway, so it's appreciative that it's finally getting underway. And
The recommendation?
go ahead, you've had a
Are you
drink?
ready?
Okay.
The recommendation is that council award RFT 2022-06 Bridge Street Bridge 34B T-9 replacement to Sierra Bridge Incorporated of Woodstock, Ontario, as per their tender submission on June 7th, 2022, in the amount of $4,782,267.90 plus HST. And that council provide authorization to K-Smart and Associates to proceed with the contract administration and the project management for the bridge replacement project with an additional fee of $100,400 for construction activities plus HST. And that council authorized expenditure of up to $93,000 plus HST for geotechnical investigations and environmental works as required during the bridge replacement project. And that council authorized the mayor and the clerk to enter into an agreement with the owner of 1210918 Ontario Inc. for access to lands for construction management and temporary structure storage. And that council directs staff to proceed with demolition of the structure after December 31st, 2022, in the event suitable funding and donations cannot be found.
Thank you, sir. Comments or questions? None. Moved by Councillor Gerber, second by Councillor Fanning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is correspondence. Note there is one piece of correspondence from Municipal Engineers Association, which was attached to the agenda. There are no bylaws. Next item is notice of motion. So we have one notice of motion this evening, and I understand we have a delegation for this item. Before commencing with hearing from the delegation, I would like to remind the delegation this evening of some guidelines for participation. Delegations will be allotted 7 minutes to speak. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate muting and removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, hate speech, or defamatory comments. Please note that other than your name and any organization you are representing is preferable. You do not provide your home address or other personal information about yourself as part of your delegation. I call upon staff to display Councillor Hallman's notice of motion concerning the minister's zoning orders. Sorry, Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Since the motion was withdrawn last meeting, and this is a brand new motion, I would assume this was the notice of motion, just letting us know the motion was coming, not that we would be considering it. Isn't the idea of a notice of motion that we see it once, the public sees it once, and then we consider it the next meeting? Just wanted some clarification on that.
It is up for debate tonight, Councillor Gerber, according to the clerk. Go ahead. You have.
Yeah. So have we changed the procedure for notice of motion?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that this notice of motion is to be treated as a brand new notice of motion and to be debated at this meeting as per the procedure bylaw.
Sorry.
Follow up, Councilor Gerber.
Yeah, I just understood the procedural bylaw was the notice of motion is presented, so everybody sees it and knows what it is, the public sees it, and then the next meeting it's discussed. And since the original motion was withdrawn, and this is a brand new motion, that's what I assumed we'd be doing tonight. But I mean, it doesn't really, it's, we're just suggesting the provincial government do some things, so we can probably do that. But it's not my understanding of how the notice of motions has ever worked.
Mr. Clerk.
Yes, through the chair. The proper 5-day notice was given. The motion was the notice of motion was added to the agenda 5 days prior. So it is up for debate as a new item. And it is according to the procedure bylaw.
Councilor Hallman.
Thank you through the mayor. Councilor Gerber, just wanted to clarify for you that I think our previous clerk's department had a different understanding of the procedural bylaw. That's all.
Okay, are we ready to display the motion? And everybody has a copy of the motion, and the motion was listed on the agenda. Okay, thank you. As stated, we have one delegation, Mr. Kevin Thompson, if he is present. Welcome, Kevin, and you have your 7 minutes, please, sir.
Good evening. Honorable Mayor, councillors, and guests. My name is Kevin Thomason, and I am the citizen who discovered late on Christmas Eve the incredibly vague notice that had just been posted to the Wilmot Township website about a special council meeting on January 4th regarding an MZO. Having seen firsthand the disruption and devastation caused in other communities by the use of undemocratic MZOs, many of us in the community had our Christmas holidays ruined, suddenly trying to learn anything we could about this MZO, figuring out how to respond, and then trying to ensure our community was adequately informed during a time when no local newspapers or media was publishing. It was a horrific holiday period of around-the-clock efforts across the community to have so many groups, organizations, and citizens working together to fight this MZO and ensure that proper planning processes were followed instead. This motion proposed by Councillor Hallman is excellent. It speaks to the misuse and abuse of MZOs across the province. If increasing use of ministerial zoning orders by our current provincial government wasn't bad enough, we now have the creation of a new EMZO or enhanced MZO that removes even the one opportunity for municipal councils to either approve or reject a request for MZOs and bypasses local input altogether, as just happened to the city of Markham and the town of Richmond Hill, where the provincial government bypassed them, their citizens, businesses, and everyone in the community, to their horror, to approve the second densest development in the world, just after the Dharamsala slums in India, a development of over 70 condo towers, each up to 80 stories tall, on just a few hundred acres of land with limited transportation access. Now, as the Premier is facing increased pushback on MZOs, They have rebranded and created another form of MZO under a new and improved name called the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator Order, or a CIHA order, to again bypass public engagement, consultation, and proper planning processes to promote development. Having spent much of my life the past couple of years dealing with the undemocratic MZOs across the province, be it here in Wilmot, the Blair Cambridge Warehouse MZO, the Stratford Glass Plant MZO, the Ajax Whitby Wetland MZO, and others, I urge Wilmot Council to approve this excellent motion against MZOs. In conclusion, we should not be using undemocratic MZOs, EMZOs, or CIRA orders to bypass public engagement, consultation, proper notice, and proven planning processes. Much of the tremendous success of our thriving community, both urban and rural, comes from decades of good planning and doing this planning better than most other jurisdictions in the world. Please vote unanimously to approve this MZO motion and send a clear message to our provincial government. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
I don't know if there's any questions or.
I see no questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Oh.
Councillor Hallman, you wish to speak to your motion?
Thanks for calling on me, Mayor Armstrong. I think Kevin Thompson kind of summarized a lot of my feelings there as well. Strongly believe in this and sending this message to the province.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Gordick. Thank you. Councillor Fenning, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. This isn't my motion, but I am happy that Councillor Hallman brought it. I think that it's very important for us as a community to have input into the way that we develop, where we develop, how we develop, and what is developed within our boundaries. It's been very concerning to see the overriding of the process that has served our community well and has allowed us to build what we have here, which is an absolutely fantastic place to live and where I've enjoyed raising my children. I think that proper planning and public input are key to ensuring that that continues and that we protect the community that we have. So I'm very much in support of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I am fully in support. I actually was going to raise a similar motion, but Angie beat me to it. Councillor Hallman beat me to it. When I saw the article that came out in April with regards to the EMZO that happened in Richmond Hill and Markham, it was alarming. I realized that perhaps it may not happen here in Wilmot because of our rural community, but I'm pretty sure that Richmond Hill and Markham did not realize that they were going to end up with such a horrific development happening in their backyard with no infrastructure in place, and the costs and the implications for their taxpayers to actually support such a horrific development that's going to be happening in that community. While it may seem hyperbolic that we are doing something, I think we as a community, similar to our conversation with the ROP review, we need to let the province know where we stand on how our community grows and our development here. And so I think it sends a strong signal of where we are as a community and what our expectations are for us to grow at a pace that's viable for our community and for our tax-paying residents. So I'm fully in support of this motion passing as well.
Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just wanted to point out that I believe there's a typo in the second whereas. It's Whereas there are very rare emergencies that warrant speeding up approval process, and the Ontario provincial government has changed the laws to let the minister issue MZOs that could otherwise be unlawful, because it should be they instead of the, violate fundamental planning rules or even create hazardous situations. So if we can just have the record corrected to reflect that.
Through the chair.
Yep.
That is noted, and we have noticed it, and that will be corrected.
So it has been noticed, so it has been corrected. I think that was a quote from the Pharaohs or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, there are no further comments. Now, I was going to ask the clerk to read, but we don't have a cot for him to finish. So we will, everyone has had a chance to read and understand. So we have a mover and a seconder. I will call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is announcements. Do any members of council have announcements they would like to make? Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. First, I just want to comment that it was good for the soul to see the graduating students from local public schools finally gathering in person this past week to celebrate their accomplishments. Congratulations to all of the graduates. It was really inspiring to see you all and starting the next chapters of your life. This Friday is the return of in-person Canada Day festivities in Wilmot, where families can finally gather to have some fun too. This year features the Ultimates Dog and Cat Show, and that's a stunt show, live music with Eric Traplin, and cover band Orange Man, bouncy castles, and crafts in the kids zone, and a variety of local business food vendors. And it all wraps up with special fireworks display. And my sincere thanks to the local people and businesses who contributed financially to keep this event alive. To mark the 40th anniversary, something special will be shared in a couple of days, celebrating what happened at Punky Doodle's Corner in 1982. Setting out to create a more welcoming and respectful path forward, organizers have worked alongside local Indigenous leaders, essentially placing a few more chairs at the table to have more conversations and make new friends. It all starts with a sunrise ceremony at the events, and then the event's opening ceremonies at 2 p.m. at Norm Essel Park. And thanks to the township for the cookies for the attendees, a special dessert to celebrate with everyone. I look forward to seeing my colleagues and community members from every corner of our community coming to join us in celebrating.
Thank you. Okay, and that's it for announcements. There's no business arising from today's closed session. The confirmatory bylaw, Mr. Clerk, please.
Yes. The recommendation is that bylaw number 2022-30 be read a first, a second, and third time, and finally passed in open council.
And that is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fisher, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And ask the clerk to read the final recommendation.
That we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor.
And that is moved by, I can't believe there was a slow show of hands. Councillor Fisher, Councillor Gerber, all in favor. That is it. Thank you. Carried. And we'll see hopefully everybody on Friday at noon to serve some cookies up.
Night, everyone.
Have a good evening.